When the alien faithful looked to the sky, their gods had vanished, silent, absent, leaving them lost and broken. Their temples turned to ash, their spirits to dust. But then a single human voice rose from the ruins. One battle cry, raw, defiant, unstoppable, echoing across shattered spires and empty shrines. And in that fierce human roar, they didn't just hear a call to fight, they heard a new kind of faith. A faith born from courage, not miracles. A faith that could never be silenced again. When the shrines began to crumble, the high priests of the Varithi gathered on the highest spire and called out to the heavens. They begged for a sign, a whisper, even a flicker of celestial light, but only the cold wind answered them. For centuries, the Varithi had trusted in the shimmering star deities who watched over them from their swirling nebulae. Every prayer had been offered beneath sacred moon pools, every child's first breath celebrated with incense and sacred chants. But now, the star gods had gone silent. Without the gods, the people lost their rhythm. Farmers abandoned the fields, fearing their crops would rot without divine blessing. Children refused to sleep, convinced that monsters waited in the shadows without celestial protection. Warriors laid down their blades, unable to muster the will to stand guard. The entire world shivered under a sky they no longer trusted. High Priestess Scylla knelt in her prayer chamber, her long white headdress pooled around her like fallen wings. Her hands trembled as she gripped the sacred staff, the final gift from the star gods before they fell silent. Each night, she spoke the old hymns, her voice echoing into a void that had once shimmered with warmth. The cities lost their glow, great floating lanterns extinguished, canals clogged with drifting prayer scrolls. Instead of praise songs, only the wails of frightened elders filled the alleys. Markets stood empty, merchants too afraid to trade. Travelers stayed locked in their homes, eyes glued to the sky, waiting for a sign that would never come. It was in this darkness that a lone human ship entered Varithi space. A small exploration vessel, barely more than a tin can with wings by galactic standards, carried only one passenger, Captain Roland Carter. A historian, a war veteran, a collector of forgotten stories. His ship's engines coughed and spat as he drifted into orbit, but he didn't turn away. Roland had heard whispers of this world. Reports from traders spoke of a society that relied entirely on its gods. They never developed their own sciences, never learned to build without prayer, never believed they could stand alone. Curious and perhaps reckless, Roland ignored every warning to stay away from a godless world spiraling into chaos. When his shuttle door opened, the first thing he saw was a crowd of gaunt, pale Varithi gathered beneath a broken shrine. Their skin, normally glowing in pale moonlight, was sallow and ashen, their luminous eyes dulled with despair. In their trembling hands they held clay prayer bowls, cracked and empty. One child looked up, wide-eyed, and whispered in a trembling voice, "Another god?" Roland stepped forward, boots sinking into the ashy soil. His voice was rough from disuse, but he forced it out anyway. "I'm no god. Just a human." The elders recoiled at first, clutching their charms and chanting in hushed panic. Yet the child approached him, small hands shaking. Her hollow eyes scanned his weathered face, his ragged jacket adorned with old Earth military patches. "Why did you come if not to save us?" she asked. He knelt down, looked her straight in the eye, and said softly, "I came to learn your story, and to share mine." Behind her, the priests began to mutter about curses and defilement. The high priestess Scylla emerged, her staff clicking on the stone ground. She regarded Roland with cold disdain. "You carry no divine spark," she spat. "You are no messenger. You are nothing." Roland stood, dusted off his knees, and looked around at the frightened faces. "Maybe you're right," he said. "But I know one thing. You don't need gods to survive." A gasp spread through the gathered crowd. Mothers pulled their children back, elders shook their heads in horror. But the child stood firm. "How can we live without gods?" she asked again, her voice nearly a sob. Roland remembered the trenches on Europa's frozen plains, the desperate screams of his squad when they were surrounded and alone, the countless times they prayed to any deity that might listen, and how every time they had to save themselves. "You can live because you're strong," he said at last, his voice rising. "Because you're alive. Because you can fight, build, cry, and heal. I've seen it. I've lived it." Scylla hissed in anger. She lifted her staff, ready to command the guards to seize him, but no one moved. Their faith had cracked. Their hands clutched nothing but dust. Roland took a deep breath. Then he shouted, his voice echoing down the abandoned streets and into the hollow temples, "Stand up!" The sound carried through the village like a shockwave. Birds exploded from the trees, startled. Children stumbled backward, eyes wide. The elders trembled, some dropping to their knees, others clutching each other. Then Roland roared again. "Stand up and fight for yourselves." The old warriors looked at each other, the words ringing like a forgotten war drum. Their hands remembered the shapes of sword grips, the feel of armor. "You don't need a god to tell you you're worthy." Roland continued, stepping onto the remains of an altar. "You don't need the stars to tell you to protect your families. You already know how." The child, the same brave girl who first approached him, suddenly grabbed a shard of a broken prayer bowl and held it high. "I don't want to wait for a god anymore," she cried, tears running down her moon-pale cheeks. "I want to fight." One by one the others stood. An old warrior took a spear from a collapsed shrine and raised it above his head. A mother picked up a broken gardening blade. A young boy found an old shield buried in the ash. Scylla screamed, striking the ground with her staff in rage. "You will all be lost. Damned. Blasphemous." But no one listened. Instead, their eyes turned to Roland, a single human standing tall, fists clenched, voice raw and cracking from sheer emotion. He leapt down and took the child's hand. "What's your name?" he asked. She blinked at him, shocked. "Leary," she whispered. "Well, Leary," he said with a small smile, "let's show them what it means to be strong without gods." From that moment, Leary became the symbol of defiance. Roland taught them to fortify the walls, to till the fields without waiting for holy rains, to repair bridges and mend homes using their own hands instead of prayers. At first, every nail driven into wood felt like heresy. Every seed planted felt like betrayal. But soon, laughter and music returned to the streets, faint at first, then swelling like sunrise after endless night. The old warriors drilled daily with Roland in the town square. Leary led the children, turning them into scouts and runners. The elders took charge of logistics and supplies. With every day, they built not just defenses but belief in each other. But the high priestess wouldn't surrender her hold. She schemed, telling small pockets of loyalists that Roland was a demon come to destroy them all. One night, she crept to the sacred pool and poisoned the water, convinced that if she couldn't save her people through faith, she would see them punished for their disobedience. The next morning, several children fell sick. Leary's breath rattled in her throat. Roland found her collapsed near the garden beds, skin pale as ice. Rage consumed him, but so did a deeper resolve. He carried Leary to the square, cradling her as she gasped for air. He didn't pray. He didn't beg to the stars. Instead, he barked orders, demanded herbs from the elders, forced warriors to run and gather clean water, boiled tools and hands, improvised a treatment as best he could. Hours passed. The sun slipped behind the blackened shrine towers. Finally, Leary opened her eyes and whispered, "Did we win?" Roland laughed, a raw, hoarse bark, and hugged her close. "Yes," he said. "We're still here. That's winning." In that moment, something broke inside the priestess. She dropped her staff and wept, crawling to Roland's feet. "I don't know how to live without them," she sobbed. "I only know faith." Roland looked down at her. "Then learn a new faith," he said softly. "Faith in each other." And for the first time since the gods fell silent, Scylla did not hear echoes in her mind. She heard the voices of her people, laughing, working, living. When the sun rose the next day, Leary led the children through the streets, chanting a new song. The warriors marched behind them, shields bright and proud. The elders handed out food and tools instead of dusty charms. And high above, where the star gods once watched, only endless sky remained, but no one looked up in fear anymore. They had a new faith now. A faith not in divine voices, but in the human who taught them to stand and roar. In every breath, every heartbeat, they carried that battle cry forward, and they would never be silent again. When the first harvest came in without a single prayer, the elders wept in disbelief. The fields, once left to rot because no god blessed them, stood golden and full. Children ran among the tall stalks, chasing each other with shrill laughter, while Leary oversaw the workers with Roland at her side. Leary had become something of a legend already, not as a holy figure, but as living proof that belief in each other could feed a starving world. She no longer carried the cracked bowl of offerings. Instead, she wore a tool belt around her slim waist, a small dagger strapped to her thigh, and her eyes shone not with ethereal light, but with a burning determination. Roland watched as she worked, his chest heavy with pride and sorrow. He could see the shape of her future even now, a leader, a warrior, a gardener of souls. The girl who once waited for gods to answer now commanded adults twice her age with the strength of 1,000 sermons. Meanwhile, Scylla, the former high priestess, moved quietly among the people. At first, they recoiled at her approach. Her face, once revered, was now a reminder of lost hope and manipulation. But slowly, she began helping with simple tasks, carrying buckets, patching roofs, tending to the sick. Each small act of service was her silent penance. Roland never truly forgave her. He didn't have to. Forgiveness wasn't the foundation he wanted them to build on. He wanted them to learn to stand, even when hearts broke, even when forgiveness didn't come. One morning, as the new village center rose, a large communal hall with strong walls and a roof of woven reeds, Roland called Lyri to the old shrine steps. She approached, wiping sweat from her brow, her long hair tied back. "Yes, teacher," she said. He motioned for her to sit. "You know," he began, "when I first came here, I thought I might just watch. Record. Learn." Lyri laughed softly, eyes sparkling. "That didn't last long." "No," Roland chuckled. "It didn't. You taught me as much as I taught you." They sat in silence, watching villagers carry beams and lay stones. Every strike of a hammer felt like a small heartbeat, pulsing with life. "I'm leaving soon," Roland said finally. Lyri's smile faded. She turned sharply to face him. "What? Why? We still need you." He raised a hand gently. "No, you don't. Not anymore." Tears welled in her eyes. "But you were never meant to follow me forever," Roland said. "Humans, we are wanderers, builders, destroyers. We leave pieces of ourselves in every world, every friend, every lost battle. And then we go." Lyri's breath caught in her throat. "I don't want you to be just another star that vanishes," she whispered. Roland reached out and cupped her cheek. "I'm not a star, Lyri. I'm not a god. I'm just a man who shouted loud enough to wake a sleeping world. And now, you and your people, you're wide awake. You have voices of your own. Cries of your own." He stood slowly, knees creaking. Lyri rose too, trembling. "You once asked me if we won," Roland said, looking out at the bustling courtyard. "Now it's not just survival. It's victory. True victory, not given by the stars but forged with your own hands." She lunged forward and hugged him fiercely. His arms wrapped around her, squeezing tight. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The world around them fell silent in respect, as if even the wind held its breath. Finally, Lyri pulled away and wiped her tears. "If you must go, promise me you'll remember us." Roland smiled, his eyes soft and warm. "I will. You taught me that gods can fall silent, but the courage of people never does. That's something I'll carry to my grave." A few days later, Roland's small shuttle stood ready on the outskirts of the settlement. A line of villagers gathered to say farewell, warriors in handmade armor, children holding woven wreaths, elders with calloused hands and hopeful smiles. Silas stood at the back, head bowed. As Roland passed her, she spoke without looking up. "Thank you for saving us from ourselves," she said softly. Roland paused, nodded once, and kept moving. There were no more words left between them. Lyri stepped forward at the ramp. She offered him a small bundle wrapped in cloth. Inside, he found a small wooden carving of the old staff she once carried, cracked and discarded. But this carving had no divine markings, just simple lines, rough edges, and a symbol of new beginnings. Roland traced it with a finger and looked up. "I made it myself," Lyri said. "A reminder that we shape our own future now." Roland tucked it into his satchel carefully. A perfect parting gift. She stood back, saluted in the new style he had taught them, a closed fist over the heart. He mirrored it, then turned and stepped onto the shuttle. As the engines roared to life, the villagers raised a unified cry, not the old hymns, but a new battle chant Lyri had taught them. It rose like thunder rolling across a valley, shaking every soul. Roland smiled through tears as he lifted off, his ship spiraling into the sunrise. Through the glass, he saw Lyri standing at the front of the crowd, her hair whipping in the wind, her voice leading the chant. He had come to learn their story, and ended up giving them a new one. When the gods had fallen silent, they believed it was the end. But in the echo of one human's battle cry, they found faith not in distant stars but in the beat of their own hearts. In the years that followed, Lyri would become a chieftain, then a teacher, then a legend. Her people spread across the plains, no longer bound by fear or superstition. They built new cities, new stories, new dreams. And above them, the stars continued to shine, quiet, distant, uncaring. But no one prayed to them anymore. They didn't need to. For in every breath, every drumbeat, every hammer strike, Roland's cry lived on. "Stand up. Fight for yourselves. You are your own gods now." And they did.